You're nothing but a burden, Mom. Get out of this house! Now! Susan's words cut through me like a blade, right as I held my 70th birthday cake in trembling hands. 70 years of life, and my own children were throwing me out of my home on my birthday. Michael stepped forward, snatching the house keys from my hands, while Brenda filmed the entire scene on her phone, grinning like she was witnessing the happiest moment of her life. You won't be needing these anymore, Mother-in-law. We've got everything covered. Kevin shoved my suitcase toward the door, the same suitcase I had packed in excitement, thinking I was going on a family vacation. How foolish I had been. But what tore me apart the most was Chloe, my sweet granddaughter, crying in the corner, covering her ears to block out her parents' screaming. She was the only one showing shame as they dragged me toward the door. Grandma, I'm so sorry, she whispered through her tears before Susan yanked her arm. Be quiet, Chloe. Your grandmother needs to learn she can't manipulate us with her victim act anymore. That was the moment something inside me shattered. Not just my heart, but my very soul. And it all began just 3 hours earlier, when I had spent the morning filling the house with cinnamon, fresh roses, and love, ready to celebrate what I thought would be the perfect birthday. My 70th birthday had begun like any other, with a quiet morning and a cup of coffee in my sunlit kitchen. I had imagined it would be a simple, peaceful day. Perhaps a call from one of my children, a card, maybe even a small gathering with my granddaughter, Chloe. But from the moment I walked into the living room, I realized that peace was the last thing I would encounter. My children, Michael and Susan, were already there, their faces twisted into expressions I didn't recognize. Brenda, Kevin, and the others hovered around, carrying gifts that now seemed like cruel mockery. They greeted me with false smiles that barely concealed the impatience in their eyes. Happy birthday, Mom, Michael said, his voice dripping with hollow enthusiasm. I returned the greeting with a small nod, sensing that something was off, though I could not yet place the tension that filled the room like thick fog. They had insisted that we sit down to a discussion about my future plans, and I, unsuspecting, agreed. The moment I put pen to paper, their true intentions became frighteningly clear. Michael leaned close, lowering his voice as if trying to manipulate me with charm. Mom, it's just for your own good. Everything we're asking is to ensure you're cared for. Susan circled the room like a predator, her eyes glinting with something I hadn't seen since my children were toddlers testing boundaries. But this wasn't testing. It was an ambush. They wanted everything: my home, my bank accounts, my possessions accumulated over decades. The photographs of my late husband, the letters he had written me during our courtship, the toys I had saved from my children's childhoods, all of it was to be theirs. Everything else. I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. I could feel the weight of 50 years of memories pressing down on me. They would sell it, throw it away, or hoard it without a thought to the life that had been lived here, the history that belonged to me. My pulse quickened, but I forced calm into my voice. I understand, I murmured as if agreeing, bringing the pen closer. But then, a small act of strategy. Kevin, could you get me a glass of water? All this excitement has made me a little dizzy. Kevin shot up eagerly, the spring in his step betraying the sense of ownership he already felt over my home. That brief absence was my chance. While he disappeared into the kitchen, I discreetly retrieved my phone from my dress pocket and activated the voice recorder. Chloe had taught me this small device a month ago, and tonight it would become my weapon. When Kevin returned with the water, I drank slowly, masking the storm inside me while my children watched impatiently. I set the glass down and lifted the pen. But instead of signing, I began to speak. My voice was steady, strong, unyielding. I want it to be very clear what is happening tonight. I, Eleanor Martinez, 70 years of age, am being extorted by my own children to hand over all my assets. Michael interrupted. Mom, don't be ridiculous. But I continued, unfazed. My son Michael Martinez, my daughter Susan Martinez, and their spouses are threatening to declare me mentally incompetent if I do not comply. They are forcing me to surrender my house, my savings, my belongings. Susan stepped forward, attempting to seize the phone, but a single look froze her in place. I also wanted it on record that they were trying to force me into a nursing home, against my will, after years of support and financial help given without question. Kevin lunged at me, but Chloe stepped between us. Don't touch her, my granddaughter shouted, her bravery a balm to my shivering spirit. Stop abusing Grandma. Susan's rage finally erupted. You are just a burden in our lives, Mom. We can't take it anymore. Leave. Each word was captured by the recorder, irrefutable evidence of their cruelty. Michael then snatched my keys with bruising force, declaring, "You don't need these anymore, Mom. We'll handle everything now." Kevin shoved a suitcase toward the door, already packed with belongings I hadn't touched. Brenda held up a lease agreement for the nursing home. "We already signed for you, mother-in-law. Hope you don't mind." They had forged my signature, violated me legally and emotionally. It was then, as Susan shoved me toward the door, that something inside me cracked, but it wasn't despair. It was resolve. "Fine," I said calmly, bewildering them. "I'll go, but I will remember every word, every push, every humiliation." They laughed, blind to the storm I was planning. Kevin nodded in approval. They thought they had won, thought the old woman was finally subdued. But they didn't know that the next 24 hours would unravel everything they believed they owned. The moment I stepped onto the sidewalk, suitcase in hand, I felt a strange mixture of loss and liberation. The house that had held 30 years of my life now belonged to strangers, yet I was alive, unbroken in spirit. The night air was cool, brushing against my cheeks as if offering solace. My heart pounded, but not with fear. It was anticipation, the kind that comes when you know the first move of a plan has been executed. I walked to the corner under the streetlight where I knew I could sit without drawing attention. The bench was cold, but it didn't matter. I needed to make the calls that would secure my future. First, David Hayes, my lawyer. He was sharp, discreet, and ambitious. Exactly the ally I needed. "Mr. Hayes, this is Eleanor Martinez. We need to activate the plan we discussed." "Yes, exactly as we rehearsed." 3 days ago, when I discovered copies of my bank statements in Brenda's purse, I knew immediate action was necessary. David listened carefully, noting the urgency. "Mrs. Martinez, are you certain? Once we proceed, there's no turning back." "I am certain," I replied. "They have shown their true colors. It's time they learn how gravely they underestimated me." Next, the bank. Patricia, my longtime account manager, had helped me set up a security protocol weeks before. "All accounts, all cards, all access," I said. She confirmed the automatic transfer to a safe account I had opened in another city, a week before I suspected betrayal. That account was under a name only I knew, a fortress built quietly, methodically, over months. By morning, all my money would be secure and beyond their reach. Every transfer, every freeze, would be executed without alerting them, yet perfectly timed to coincide with the next phase of my plan. The hardest call was to Chloe. My granddaughter's voice trembled as she answered, hiding from her parents. "Grandma, where are you?" "Mom and Dad said you're already at the nursing home." "I'm fine, my love." "Listen carefully. Tomorrow you'll see why I did this. Remember, nothing I've done was to hurt you, only to protect you. Save this number and don't tell anyone." Her sobs were like nails on my heart, yet I knew she needed to understand that this was for her as much as it was for me. "One day, when you're older, you'll understand why I had to act," I whispered. She promised, quietly, to remember. Then the real estate call. Frank Thompson, a man who specialized in quick sales for emergencies, had everything ready. "Eleanor, the transaction can be executed tonight, and the new family will take possession by tomorrow morning." The knowledge filled me with quiet satisfaction. While my children celebrated their perceived victory inside the house, outside, their world was already shifting. They thought they were taking everything from me. In reality, they were about to discover that the only thing I had truly held onto, the right to control my life, remained mine. While making these calls, I glimpsed the silhouettes inside my home. Michael prowled the living room, Susan rifled through my bedroom, Kevin pawed through my office. They were celebrating, unaware that every movement was captured. The week before, when I confirmed my suspicions, I had installed discreet security cameras. Every cruel comment, every triumphant laugh was being recorded in real time. Brenda, ever cunning, had set up her own recording to claim I agreed to go to the home. She didn't know that my pocket recorder was still active, capturing context, threats, and coercion. The final call was to secure my transportation. An older, trustworthy driver arrived within 15 minutes, helping with my suitcase without questions. Just professionalism. As we drove through the empty city streets toward the airport, I felt a strange serenity. Lights flickered behind me. My children's celebration continued, utterly oblivious. The airport at midnight was almost deserted, its polished floors echoing my footsteps. I made my way to the VIP lounge, a a quiet sanctuary where I could wait for the morning, knowing that the first phase of my plan was complete. And then the messages began. Kevin texted first, "Eleanor, one of your cards isn't working. Call us." Susan followed, "Mom, some accounts aren't accessible. Come to the bank." Each new message was laced with growing panic. Michael called repeatedly, demanding answers, and Brenda sent desperate texts, pleading for guidance. They had no idea that the chaos they were experiencing was intentional, a mirror to the emotional turmoil they had imposed on me for decades. By 4:00 a.m., the calls were relentless. My phone rang every few minutes. Each missed call was a small, quiet victory, each voicemail a drop of justice. I didn't answer. I watched the city wake from afar, sipping herbal tea, feeling the first warmth of true liberation. The storm they had planned for me had backfired in spectacular fashion. Tomorrow, they would awaken to a reality where my house, my wealth, and my patience were no longer theirs to manipulate. The first light of dawn painted the city in soft hues of pink and gold as I sipped my tea in the quiet of the VIP lounge. The world was still asleep, except for me, a woman who had finally reclaimed her life. I watched the messages and missed calls accumulate, but I didn't answer. Every ringing phone was proof that my children's empire of entitlement was unraveling. The irony of it was delicious. They had celebrated all night, believing that they had stripped me of everything, yet the truth was far more satisfying. By 7:00 a.m., I received the first report from Frank, my real estate agent. "Mrs. Martinez, the sale is complete. The new family will take possession at 10:00 a.m. Locks will be changed immediately, and the police have been instructed to respond to any unauthorized entry." I smiled, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in decades, I could breathe freely. My house, which had been a prison of filial cruelty, was now beyond their reach. My children would awaken to a reality they had neither anticipated nor prepared for. Meanwhile, the messages and calls became frantic. Kevin's texts were increasingly desperate. "Mom, this can't be happening. Call us now." Susan was sending a series of messages that alternated between pleading and angry accusations. Michael called repeatedly, leaving panicked voicemails, each more frantic than the last. Brenda, always cunning, tried to assert control by threatening legal action, but her words held no power against the preparations I had meticulously made. My children were drowning in chaos, their own greed and arrogance now turning against them. At exactly 10:00 a.m., as I had predicted, Chloe's call came through. Her voice, though strained with worry, carried a note of awe. "Grandma, they're outside! People with new keys, claiming the house!" I listened quietly, savoring every word. She continued. "Mom tried to stop them, but they showed papers, legal ones." My heart ached for the fear she felt, but also swelled with pride. Chloe had understood the depth of my planning and the necessity of my actions. I reassured her in a calm voice. "My love, breathe. Everything is under control. You did what you could." I spent the next hour coordinating with David Hayes, ensuring that every legal safeguard was activated. The recordings from the night of my birthday were cataloged, time-stamped, and ready. If my children attempted any legal maneuver, there would be irrefutable proof of their coercion, threats, and abuse. David's efficiency and discretion were unmatched, and I knew that my position was unassailable. By mid-morning, everything was in place. My money was secure, my home sold, my granddaughter safe, and my children exposed for the manipulative, greedy people they truly were. By noon, I boarded my flight to my new life. The airport was calm, almost reverent in its stillness. I watched the city recede beneath the clouds, the place where I had spent 70 years of my life shrinking into the distance. Below, my children were awakening to their collapse, but above, I felt lighter than I had in decades. Each passing mile separated me from their toxicity, from the constant demands and unearned expectations. The wind outside the plane's window seemed to whisper of freedom, of a new chapter that belonged solely to me. Once I arrived in the coastal city, I settled into my small apartment overlooking the ocean. It was modest but filled with light and warmth. The first sunrise I watched from the balcony brought tears to my eyes, not of sorrow but of triumph. I brewed chamomile tea, inhaling the salty sea air, and allowed myself the rare luxury of silence. Here, no one demanded my money, no one sought to manipulate my emotions, no one questioned my worth. For the first time in decades, I felt truly safe. Over the next few days, I allowed myself to disconnect completely. The phone remained off, the emails unchecked. My past life, with all its turmoil, was behind me. I focused on small pleasures, the sound of waves, the smell of coffee in the morning, the the warmth of sunlight on my skin. I began planning my new life with Chloe, knowing that when she reached adulthood, she could join me and escape the toxic environment she had grown up in. My independence was no longer theoretical. It was tangible, real, and unassailable. Meanwhile, back in the city I had left, chaos reigned. My children discovered the house was no longer theirs, the locks changed, the new family already moving in. Their arguments, their desperation, their finger pointing, were all captured in the recordings I had made. Kevin and Susan blamed each other. Michael yelled accusations that met deaf ears, and Brenda attempted legal maneuvering that David quickly dismantled. They had underestimated me, and now they were paying the price in every possible way. By the end of the week, the repercussions of my escape and strategy became evident. Michael lost his job, unable to cover debts without access to my funds. Brenda, shamed and financially embarrassed, returned to live with her parents. Susan and Kevin, stripped of resources, found themselves living separate nights in friends' homes, their relationships strained beyond repair. Every action, every choice they had made to manipulate and harm me had boomeranged in full force. I, on the other hand, sat in my small apartment, sipping tea, the gentle lull of the ocean my only soundtrack. Weeks passed in my coastal sanctuary, and the weight of the past gradually lifted with each sunrise. Chloe and I settled into a rhythm that was peaceful, predictable, and entirely ours, each morning. We walked along the shoreline, letting the sand sift between our fingers, and each evening, we watched the sun sink beneath the horizon, painting the sky with colors I had almost forgotten existed. Life had slowed, not out of necessity, but by design. For the first time, I was in control of my own time, my own choices, my own joy. Messages and emails from my children had slowed, but when they did arrive, they were frantic, desperate, or venomous. Susan's attempts at apologies were always half-hearted, phrased as if she could undo years of neglect with a few hollow words. Kevin tried logical arguments, begging me to return funds or resolve the misunderstanding. Michael oscillated between pleading and threats. And Brenda, she sent carefully worded letters, trying to appear reasonable while subtly threatening legal action. I did not respond to a single message. Silence, I had discovered, was far more effective than argument or explanation. The recordings I had made on my birthday night became my safeguard, a digital fortress of truth. David Hayes advised me to store backups in multiple secure locations, which I did, both online in encrypted drives and offline on physical media hidden within the apartment. Every insult, every coercion, every act of betrayal was documented. If my children ever attempted to challenge me legally again, they would not find ambiguity, only irrefutable proof of their cruelty. I smiled quietly, thinking about how carefully they had underestimated me. They had believed age and perceived frailty made me powerless, but they had miscalculated entirely. Chloe became my anchor in this new life. She blossomed under the freedom we shared, her laughter echoing through the small apartment, like music I hadn't realized I'd missed so deeply. She would sit at the kitchen table, textbooks sprawled in front of her, and I would sip tea beside her, offering guidance where it was needed, or simply listening when words were unnecessary. Her presence reminded me daily why I had endured the cruelty of my children's manipulation. It was all worth escaping for moments like these. One afternoon, while Chloe studied, I received a call from Patricia at the bank. "Mrs. Martinez," she said, her voice careful and professional. "I wanted to confirm that all additional cards remain canceled, all accounts secure, and transfers complete. No activity has occurred since your protective measures were activated." Relief washed over me, though not as much as the satisfaction of knowing that my children were now powerless over my finances. Their panic, their desperation, had created a ripple of consequences that continued to affect them without my interference. Despite the calm of my new life, I occasionally reflected on the magnitude of what had occurred. My house, my possessions, my decades of memories, had all been taken from me in a single night. Yet my response had transformed a tragedy into empowerment. Selling the house quickly had been a calculated risk, one that ensured my children could not reclaim even a fragment of the life they tried to steal. I had acted not with malice, but with precise, deliberate justice. In my heart, I knew they had learned the cost of their greed, the consequences of cruelty. Chloe and I spent evenings walking along the cliffs, discussing her aspirations and dreams. She confided in me about her experiences at school, her budding interests in law, and her desire to protect vulnerable people. I shared my experiences cautiously, careful not to instill bitterness, only awareness. She listened intently, the maturity in her eyes reminding me that some wounds, when handled correctly, could transform into wisdom. Her compassion and resilience were my greatest reward, proof that my sacrifices and strategic actions were not in vain. Months later, on a quiet Sunday, I received a letter from David Hayes. He informed me that my children had attempted to sue me again, citing emotional abandonment and financial disruption. But their case was dismissed immediately thanks to the recordings and legal documentation we had prepared. The judge even warned them that any further attempts at harassment could result in criminal charges. I poured myself a cup of tea and let the warmth spread through me, savoring the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been firmly established. The months passed, and slowly, the distant noise of my children's lives, now chaos, instability, and financial ruin, became background static. I focused on my garden, cultivating tomatoes, herbs, and the flowers I had always loved. Chloe helped me plant bulbs for the spring, and we watched as new life grew from the earth. These were small, tangible reminders that life, when nurtured carefully, could flourish despite past neglect. The true measure of freedom, I realized, was the absence of fear and the presence of choice. My children had tried to dictate my life, to manipulate my emotions and finances, to erase my autonomy. But I had reclaimed it. Each sunrise, each wave against the shore, each smile from Chloe reinforced that truth. They had taken everything they thought they wanted, yet in doing so, they had given me the ultimate reward, control over my life, my destiny, and my peace. Spring arrived, painting the city with pastel blossoms and the fresh scent of renewal. My apartment, modest yet luminous, had become more than a home. It was a sanctuary. Every morning, Chloe and I brewed coffee and sat on the balcony, watching the waves crash against the rocks below, our conversations meandering from the trivial to the profound. I felt a peace that had eluded me for decades, a calm only achieved when control over one's own life is restored. One afternoon, while I was pruning my rose bushes, a letter arrived from a law firm I had never seen before. Curiosity piqued, I carefully opened it. The letter was from a representative of my children. They were pleading for a meeting, claiming they had reflected on their mistakes, asking for reconciliation. I read the words slowly, savoring the irony. After everything they had done, after the betrayal, the threats, the emotional manipulation, they wanted forgiveness. They wanted me to repair the damage they had caused. I put the letter down and inhaled the salty breeze. Chloe noticed my pause. "Grandma, what is it?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. I smiled faintly. "Just a letter from your parents," I replied. "They want to see me again." She froze, unsure whether to feel hope or caution. "Do you want to see them?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "No, my love. They had their chance to treat me with respect and kindness, and they failed. My forgiveness is not a tool for their convenience. It is something earned, if ever." That evening, we watched the sunset together, and I realized that my past life, filled with obligations, guilt, and endless manipulation, was truly behind me. Chloe leaned against my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. We did not need words. In that moment, our bond, forged through adversity and love, was all the family I required. The truth settled in my heart sometimes. The most profound acts of revenge are the ones that preserve your dignity while removing yourself from those who would harm you. Weeks later, I received news that my former house had been fully renovated by its new owners. They had replaced locks, changed interiors, and begun a new chapter in the home that my children had tried to claim. I felt no attachment or sorrow. That house, filled with memories of joy, pain, and betrayal, was no longer mine. But I had something far more valuable: freedom. For the first time in decades, I realized that material possessions were secondary to autonomy, to control over one's life. Chloe continued to flourish at school, and her confidence reminded me daily of the wisdom in protecting her from the toxicity of her parents. She expressed interest in elder law and advocacy, inspired by what she had witnessed. I encouraged her, knowing that her purpose would help others avoid the pain we had endured. Together we planned small projects, volunteering at shelters, assisting elderly neighbors with paperwork, and supporting those navigating difficult family dynamics. My experience had become a teaching tool, a way to transform pain into purpose. 6 months after leaving, I received an anonymous package at the apartment. Inside were a few small mementos from my previous life, a faded photograph of my late husband, a pressed flower from my garden, a letter I had written decades ago. There was no note, no signature. I held each item tenderly, not with longing, but with recognition. These items were reminders of the life I had built, of the love I had experienced, and the strength I had reclaimed. My past was not erased. It was honored in memory, without allowing it to dictate my present. Chloe and I maintained our routines, walks along the beach, garden work, reading together, and quiet evenings filled with conversation or music. Her laughter was medicine, her curiosity a reminder that life could still surprise and delight us. I found joy in small details, the way the sunlight reflected on the water, the aroma of herbs cooking on the stove, the rustle of pages as we read side by side. I realized that happiness is not found in material wealth or in the approval of others, but in the freedom to live authentically, surrounded by those who truly care. The messages from my children grew sporadic and increasingly desperate. Susan tried to manipulate Chloe directly, but I had prepared my granddaughter for this. Listen carefully, I told her. Never give in to their guilt or threats. You are safe here, and your choices are yours alone. Chloe nodded, her confidence growing with each interaction. She learned to navigate their attempts at coercion with clarity and strength. It was gratifying to see her inherit not just my love, but also the armor I had forged through years of struggle. One evening, as we were having tea on the balcony, Chloe asked a question that lingered in the air. Grandma, do you ever feel sad for them? That they lost everything. I looked at the horizon, watching the sun dip into the water, and I replied, sometimes, my love. But sadness must not cloud judgment. They made their choices. We honor ourselves by learning from their mistakes, not by carrying their burdens. Chloe nodded, absorbing the lesson. In that exchange, I realized that teaching her resilience was as crucial as protecting her from harm. The months continued with quiet victories and small joys. My financial independence was complete, my legal protections ironclad, and my emotional well being restored. I spent time reflecting, writing in my journal, and planning for the future with hope rather than fear. Every action I took was deliberate, thoughtful, and aligned with my values. The mistakes of the past were no longer chains. They were lessons that allowed me to thrive. By the time summer rolled in, our life had settled into a rhythm that felt like a warm, steady heartbeat. Mornings began with Chloe and me sharing a simple breakfast, fresh fruit toast, and coffee brewed just the way I liked it. We sat on the balcony, listening to the waves and planning our day. The apartment, though modest, felt vast in comparison to the emotional prison I had left behind. Every corner was imbued with the sense of freedom, safety, and choice that I had fought so hard to reclaim. One morning, I received a letter from my former neighbor in the old city. She wrote about my children's household, describing chaos, arguments, and the disarray that had followed my departure. The descriptions were vivid and almost poetic in their own way, depicting the very consequences I had predicted. I folded the letter with a quiet satisfaction. Chloe noticed my smile and asked, "Grandma, are they suffering?" I shook my head gently. "Not suffering, my love. They are facing reality. They made choices, and reality is the teacher they refused to listen to before." Chloe was flourishing at school. Her independence and sense of justice mirrored my own, though she carried it with youthful grace rather than hardened resolve. She had grown into a young woman of intelligence and compassion, someone who understood the value of self, respect, and dignity. Watching her thrive, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not because of wealth or possessions, but because of the resilience we had nurtured together. Every achievement she celebrated was a shared triumph. I had also resumed writing in earnest. My journal, once a private escape, became a record of our new life. I detailed our routines, the lessons Chloe learned, the moments of peace that had been impossible in my previous home. I wrote letters to the women at the shelter, offering guidance, support, and hope. The act of writing transformed my experiences into a legacy, a way to turn pain into empowerment. My story became more than personal. It became a beacon for those trapped in the invisible cages of manipulation and abuse. Mid-July brought an unexpected visitor, a man named Richard, a lawyer who had known my late husband professionally. He approached cautiously, explaining that he had been informed of my situation and wanted to ensure everything was legally secure. I welcomed him with measured warmth, knowing that proper documentation was vital. He reviewed my accounts, my property, and my legal arrangements, confirming that my protections were ironclad. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, "you have done everything correctly. Your children can no longer touch your finances or your property." Relief washed over me. For the first time, I truly felt untouchable, not in arrogance, but in the safety of my rights and careful planning. Chloe and I spent the afternoon gardening. I taught her how to prune tomatoes and basil, how to recognize the early signs of disease in plants, and the subtle ways sunlight and soil interact to nurture growth. She laughed as she dirtied her hands, and I marveled at the normalcy of it all, the simple joys that had been absent from my previous life. We worked in silence sometimes, content with the rhythm of shared labor. Other times, we spoke of dreams, aspirations, and the world we hoped to help create through small acts of kindness and justice. Evenings were our time for reflection. We would sit with tea on the balcony, watching the horizon glow as the sun sank into the ocean. One particular evening, Chloe asked about my children again. "Grandma, do you ever think they'll change? Do you think they'll learn?" I took a sip of chamomile tea and let the silence stretch for a moment before answering. People can only change if they are willing to see the truth of their actions and take responsibility. Your parents chose to ignore reality for decades. I don't hope for change anymore. I focus on what I can nurture, the life I've reclaimed, and the values I can pass to you. My correspondence with the shelter continued to grow. Women wrote to me with stories of coercion, betrayal, and abuse. I offered advice on protecting finances, asserting boundaries, and reclaiming self-worth. In a quiet sense, I had become an advocate, my own story serving as both shield and inspiration. Every message I received reminded me that the pain I had endured could be transformed into a tool to help others. My suffering had a purpose beyond itself. One Saturday morning, Chloe discovered a stray kitten outside our building. Its fur was matted, eyes wary, and body trembling. She brought it inside, and we nursed it back to health together. Caring for the kitten became another metaphor for our journey. Patience, attention, and unwavering love could heal wounds, restore trust, and build new beginnings. Chloe named it Hope, and its presence filled the apartment with warmth, a living emblem of resilience and renewal. As summer waned, I reflected on the year since my escape. Each day had been deliberate, each moment a reclaiming of freedom and self-determination. I no longer feared the past, nor did I long for the people who had wronged me. They existed in a shadow I observed only from a distance, a cautionary tale of greed, entitlement, and failure to honor love. Chloe and I were the center of our world now, and in that world, peace, trust, and dignity reigned supreme. Autumn arrived, painting the sky and streets with deep amber and crimson hues. Chloe and I embraced the change of season with small rituals, morning walks along the seaside promenade, collecting fallen leaves, and sharing stories of the past that shaped us. Each day felt precious because every day was a choice now, a life no longer dictated by fear or manipulation. The weight that had haunted me for decades was gone, replaced by clarity, purpose, and quiet joy. One crisp morning, I received an unexpected package. It was from an old friend of my late husband, someone I had not seen in years. Inside was a leather-bound photo album filled with snapshots of our early family life vacations, birthdays, graduations, and countless mundane moments now frozen in time. Flipping through the pages, I felt a bittersweet nostalgia, but it was tempered by the knowledge that I had reclaimed my narrative. I was no longer a passive observer of my own story. I was the author of its final chapters. Chloe watched me with curiosity, and I shared select memories with her, laughing at silly mistakes and marveling at the endurance of love that had once filled our home. The letters from my children continued, though sporadically and with dwindling desperation. Susan's tone oscillated between forced politeness and thinly veiled resentment. Michael attempted rational arguments, blaming circumstances, debts, and miscommunication. Kevin's messages were sparse, each one tinged with frustration at his inability to access my accounts or assert control. I read them, noted their words, and then placed them aside. My response was silent. Life's consequences had arrived, measured in lost wealth, fractured relationships, and a lesson in humility they refused to internalize. Chloe excelled at school. Her teachers praised her independence, resilience, and integrity, qualities nurtured by her mother's guidance and my own hard-earned wisdom. She became a bridge between my past and the present, embodying the strength, empathy, and discernment I had hoped to instill. Watching her navigate adolescence with moral clarity reminded me of the life I had fought to reclaim, one grounded not in material possession, but in courage, love, and the unshakable sense of self. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, Chloe asked a question that caught me off guard. "Grandma, do you ever miss them? Your children, I mean." I took a slow sip of herbal tea, letting the warmth fill me. "I used to," I admitted softly, But now I see them as they are, and I understand that missing them would mean longing for a life that never respected me. I don't miss that. I miss only what I once hoped for them: compassion, respect, and honesty. But I do not mourn their absence. I celebrate our presence here and now. The winter months were equally serene. I volunteered regularly at the shelter, guiding women through financial and emotional recovery, helping them navigate the legal systems that had once seemed so impenetrable. Each woman who left the shelter stronger, more confident, and self-assured was a small victory in the ongoing war against abuse and oppression. I became a living testament to resilience, demonstrating that age, experience, and determination could combine to protect oneself from even the most calculated betrayals. During the holidays, Chloe and I created our own traditions. We baked cookies, decorated our small apartment, and exchanged handmade gifts. There were no arguments over finances, no false smiles masking resentment, no expectations that I sacrifice my peace for appearances. Each shared laugh, each moment of connection, was a rebellion against the toxic patterns I had endured for decades. This was true celebration, grounded in love and freedom rather than obligation or manipulation. One afternoon, I received a call from a distant cousin who had been quietly following my situation. She expressed admiration for the way I had navigated the treachery of my own children, turning their greed and cruelty into a mechanism for self-preservation and justice. Her words were validating, reminding me that my actions had not been vengeful in the petty sense. They had been protective, strategic, and ultimately transformative. Chloe listened to the conversation, her eyes wide with understanding. I explained that justice is often quieter than revenge, but infinitely more powerful when applied with foresight and precision. As the year drew to a close, Chloe approached me one evening with a determined expression. "Grandma, I want to help others like you did. I want to learn, to understand, to fight for people who can't defend themselves. Can you teach me more about the law, about protecting people?" My heart swelled with pride. "Of course, my love. Knowledge is the greatest shield we can offer. Together we'll learn, and together we'll make sure others don't endure what I went through." By the time New Year's approached, our lives had settled into a harmonious rhythm. Our small apartment overlooked the ocean, and each sunrise was a reminder that freedom, dignity, and love were choices I had fought for and won. Chloe's laughter echoed through the rooms, a constant affirmation that the life I had carved out, away from betrayal, manipulation, and greed, was not only sustainable but joyful. My children had collapsed under the weight of their own decisions. Chloe and I had flourished under the protection of ours. The following spring brought warmth and renewal, not just in the world around me, but within my heart. Chloe and I spent long hours tending to our little garden, planting marigolds, tulips, and herbs, creating a space that radiated life and hope. Each bloom was a reminder that even after the harshest winters, literal or metaphorical, beauty could flourish. I watched Chloe's hands work the soil with care, her determination reflecting a resilience I had nurtured and now admired. Together, we transformed our small balcony into a sanctuary, a physical manifestation of the life we had reclaimed from the chaos and betrayal of the past. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail, bearing the official seal of the court. My heart skipped a beat, but not with fear. This time it was anticipation. The letter confirmed that Susan and Michael's lawsuit regarding alleged financial mismanagement and abandonment had been permanently dismissed, with the judge issuing a stern warning that any further attempts at harassment could result in legal consequences. The satisfaction I felt was profound, though tempered with compassion for their continued inability to learn from their mistakes. Chloe peeked over my shoulder, eyes wide with excitement. "Grandma, that means we won completely," she exclaimed. I nodded, explaining gently that victory is not just about winning a case, but about reclaiming one's peace and autonomy. The months that followed were marked by stability and subtle joy. We established routines that nurtured both mind and body: morning walks along the coastline, afternoon reading sessions on the balcony, and evenings spent cooking meals together. Chloe had begun a part-time internship at a local law firm, gaining first-hand experience in the field that had inspired her through my own story. Watching her navigate the professional world, balancing compassion with assertiveness, filled me with pride. It was a testament to the lessons she had absorbed, not just from me, but from the reality of human behavior she had witnessed in her own family. One evening, while preparing dinner, Chloe asked a question that lingered in the air. "Grandma, Do you ever think about forgiveness? About giving them a chance to make amends? I paused, stirring the soup slowly, letting the aroma fill the kitchen. Forgiveness is a delicate thing, I replied. It is earned through consistent actions, not demanded through words. When one is desperate, I have chosen to protect my life and my dignity first. If they truly change, time will reveal it. But I will never sacrifice my well-being for empty promises. Chloe nodded, her expression a mixture of understanding and admiration. She had absorbed more than just my words. She had internalized the boundaries I had fought to establish. Spring gave way to summer, and with it came new challenges and opportunities. I began volunteering at a local community center, teaching women financial literacy and strategies to protect themselves from coercion or manipulation. Each session was infused with personal anecdotes, carefully chosen to illustrate the importance of vigilance and self-respect. The women listened intently, their eyes lighting up with recognition and empowerment as they realized that age or circumstance did not diminish their capacity for agency. Chloe sometimes accompanied me, offering her youthful perspective and insights into legal frameworks, bridging the generational gap with ease and intelligence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Chloe and I sat on the balcony sipping chamomile tea. The waves lapped rhythmically against the shore, a soothing backdrop to our conversation. "Grandma," she said quietly, "I sometimes imagine what it would have been like if they had treated you with respect. Do you ever think about that?" I smiled, a bittersweet curve of memory and wisdom. "Sometimes, my love, but dwelling on what-ifs only chains us to the past. I choose to focus on the life we are building now, the love we share, and the freedom we have earned. That is real. That is ours." Chloe rested her head against my shoulder, a gesture of trust and mutual affection, and I felt the profound weight of our shared journey. Summer was punctuated with small celebrations of resilience. We marked Chloe's high school graduation with a modest gathering, surrounded by close friends who respected the boundaries and values we had cultivated. There were no pretenses, no opportunists, no one seeking to exploit our achievements for personal gain. Every smile, every hug, every word of encouragement was genuine. Chloe's speech, delivered with poise and clarity, reflected not just academic accomplishments, but the moral and emotional growth that had been nurtured in the crucible of past adversity. As the days grew longer, I took to writing regularly in my journal, capturing not only our daily lives but also reflections on justice, autonomy, and the reclamation of dignity. I revisited the recordings from that fateful birthday night, not out of vindictiveness, but as a reminder of the clarity and courage that had carried me through betrayal. Listening to the voices of my children, each word dripping with entitlement and disregard, reinforced the importance of self-preservation and measured response. I knew that in choosing my path, I had rewritten the final chapter of my own story, not just for survival, but for the cultivation of a life rich with authenticity and freedom. Autumn arrived with a crispness in the air, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and change. Chloe and I adjusted our routines to the season, incorporating early morning walks when the city was quiet, and the chill made the world feel fresh and alive. Each step we took along the waterfront reminded me that life, like the seasons, moves forward, shedding the old and preparing for growth. Chloe, now more confident and independent than ever, occasionally asked questions that revealed her burgeoning understanding of human complexity. "Grandma, do you ever feel guilty for leaving them?" she asked one morning as we collected fallen leaves to compost. I paused, considering the question carefully. "No, my love. Guilt is for those who have wronged. I acted to protect myself, my dignity, and our future. Feeling guilt for asserting boundaries only diminishes the strength we fought to reclaim." Her eyes, bright and inquisitive, reflected the lessons she had absorbed. She had witnessed firsthand the destructive consequences of entitlement and selfishness, but she had also seen the beauty of courage and strategic action. She understood that morality was not always black and white. Sometimes, survival and justice demanded a hard, unwavering line. It thrilled me to see her internalize these truths at such a young age, and I felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that the legacy I was leaving was not material wealth, but resilience, wisdom, and ethical strength. One afternoon, a package arrived at our apartment. It was unmarked except for the return address of a local courier service. Curious, I opened it to find a small, handcrafted photo album. Inside were pictures I had never seen, photos of my late husband and me from decades past, candid moments of laughter, holidays, and quiet evenings at home. Chloe leaned over my shoulder, sharing in my nostalgia. Grandma, these are beautiful. Who sent them? I examined the handwriting, familiar yet mysterious. It was from an old friend of my husband's, someone who had quietly observed our family over the years and wanted to ensure that these memories reached me, knowing I had been unfairly pushed away from the life I had built. Tears welled in my eyes, not of sadness, but of recognition that kindness and loyalty existed even in the shadows of betrayal. The following week, we received news that the women at the shelter where I volunteered were thriving. Several had secured safe housing, employment, and the support of friends who encouraged their independence. Letters arrived regularly, full of gratitude and stories of resilience. Each note reminded me that my experience, though painful, had transformed into a tool for empowerment. Chloe and I often discussed these letters over evening tea, analyzing the lessons and celebrating the courage of women who, like us, refused to allow cruelty and manipulation to define their lives. As autumn deepened, the nights grew longer, and our apartment became a sanctuary of warmth and reflection. I found solace in journaling, capturing both the quiet victories and the occasional pangs of memory. One evening, as the amber glow of the streetlights seeped through the windows, I penned a letter, not for my children, but for myself, a testament to the journey I had endured. I wrote of betrayal, courage, and the strategic reclaiming of agency. I described the precise moments that had shifted the balance of power and documented the careful planning that had ensured our safety and freedom. In each word, I reinforced the lessons learned. Dignity is non-negotiable, love cannot be coerced, and autonomy is the foundation of a life worth living. Chloe, now fully immersed in her studies, began preparing for a summer internship with a law firm specializing in elder care and family law. She approached the opportunity with seriousness and excitement, determined to protect others from the injustices we had endured. Watching her passion and commitment reminded me of the true value of the sacrifices I had made. It was not money or property that defined our victory, but the nurturing of a next generation who understood justice, compassion, and personal boundaries. One crisp morning, I received a call from a representative at a financial institution where my children had previously attempted unauthorized transactions. The message was brief but gratifying. Any lingering access they might have had to our accounts had been permanently revoked, and further attempts would result in immediate legal action. Chloe peeked at my phone, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Grandma, you really didn't leave anything to chance," she said, her tone half teasing, half reverent. I smiled, acknowledging the careful planning and foresight that had safeguarded our new life. Preparation is everything, my love. Justice without strategy is merely hope. As the leaves turned gold and amber, we took the time to travel briefly along the coast, visiting small towns and local markets. The simplicity of these journeys reinforced the serenity we had fought to create. No one demanded money, no one judged our choices, and no one sought to undermine our independence. Each day was a celebration of autonomy and the peace that comes from reclaiming control over one's life. Chloe and I laughed freely, shared stories, and built memories that were entirely ours, untainted by past wounds. Winter had begun to settle in, frosting the edges of the balcony and painting the rooftops with silver light. Chloe and I spent mornings tending to our small indoor garden, warming our hands over steaming cups of herbal tea while discussing plans for the coming year. The apartment, though modest, had become a sanctuary of laughter, learning, and love, the home I had always wanted, free from manipulation and fear. Each day I woke without anxiety or dread, savoring the peace that had once seemed unattainable. The scars from my past were still there, etched into my memories and my heart, but they no longer dictated my life. One chilly December morning, Chloe brought in the mail and handed me a plain envelope addressed in my handwriting. Curious, I opened it to find a letter I had written years ago, during a time when my children's demands weighed heavily on me. It was a reminder of the promises I had made to myself to protect my dignity, to prioritize my well-being, and to never let others take advantage of my kindness again. Reading it, I felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that I had kept every promise, even when the path had been difficult and lonely. Chloe watched me, her eyes reflecting admiration and understanding. "Grandma, you taught me that courage isn't just about fighting others. It's about standing up for yourself," she said softly. Her words made me realize that the true legacy of my rebellion wasn't in the downfall of my children, but in the lessons of strength and self-respect I had passed on. Life continued with a rhythm of quiet joy. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and simple weekly rituals without the chaos of entitlement or manipulation. Chloe blossomed into a young woman whose heart was as strong as her intellect, inspired not only by my resilience, but by the clarity of justice we had enforced. The shelter where I volunteered expanded, helping more women than ever, and I became a mentor, guiding them with empathy and strategy. Every story of a woman reclaiming her life reinforced the truth. I had discovered the power to change one's destiny resides within, and protecting that power is essential. News of my children's downfall occasionally reached me through distant acquaintances or legal bulletins. Michael had struggled to maintain employment, Kevin had fallen back into debt, and Susan's reputation had suffered in the community. They still blamed me, still believed I had orchestrated their suffering purely out of spite, but I had long ceased to care about their perception. They had chosen their path, a life of short-sighted greed and cruelty. I had chosen mine, a life of dignity, autonomy, and meaningful relationships, and in that choice I found freedom. One serene evening, Chloe and I walked along the beach, the sky painted in shades of pink and violet as the sun dipped below the horizon. I inhaled the salty air and felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. "Grandma," Chloe said, her voice thoughtful, "do you ever regret anything?" I shook my head slowly. "No, my love. Everything I endured, every plan I made, every difficult decision, it all led me here. To peace, to security, to a life I control. Regret has no place when you honor yourself." In those moments, I understood that revenge, justice, and self-preservation were not acts of malice. They were acts of necessity. The real triumph was not in depriving my children of wealth or comfort, but in reclaiming my life and demonstrating that no one, not even those closest to us, could dictate our worth. Chloe had witnessed this firsthand, and in her, I saw the continuation of my values, strength, wisdom, and an unshakable sense of self-respect. As the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, we returned to our warm apartment. I brewed tea and watched Chloe settle by the window with her law books, the glow of the lamplight reflecting the fire of her determination. I realized then that life had gifted me more than material security or vindication. It had given me a family forged by love and loyalty, built not on obligation, but on choice. My children had taken my possessions, but they had never owned my spirit, and that was the treasure I carried with me every day. I sat on the balcony that night, the world quiet except for the distant crashing of waves against the shore. I reflected on my journey, the betrayal, the meticulous planning, the liberation, and the eventual peace. My story was no longer one of pain, but of empowerment. I had rewritten the ending, not with rage, but with intelligence, patience, and unwavering self-respect. And as Chloe's laughter drifted through the apartment, mingling with the scent of winter and tea, I finally understood that my best years had truly begun the moment I decided to honor myself. For anyone who has ever been manipulated, controlled, or made to feel invisible, remember this dignity is priceless. Boundaries are essential. Self-respect is non-negotiable. My story proves that no matter your age, no matter the odds, reclaiming your life and your worth is not only possible, it is transformative. And as I closed my journal that night, I whispered to the wind, to the ocean, and to the stars above, I will never allow anyone to take from me what I have earned through courage, wisdom, and the refusal to be diminished. My life is mine, and it always will be.